So the Federal Reserve is actually more of a banking cartel than it is anything connected to the federal government that controls our currency. And so even though the Constitution says our money should be gold and silver only, and the reason for that is it constrains government, because the only way to get gold and silver is to tax it, to take it directly from. You can't print it into existence. But the people who put this system in place, they knew when that Federal Reserve was created that it would give them enormous power and influence, that they would control the currency supply of the United States. And so I believe that's where it came from. That was their intent. They've known all along that this has a shelf life to it, but the purpose was control.
And this is why, I mean, just to insert here that allegedly the 13th Amendment, I researched that, where it was not passed, but they knew that they needed to have an amendment in order to get around the constitutional requirements of what you said about the currency. But if they could bring it in through an amendment, well, then you could legitimately change the Constitution,
Sure.
and that's okay. But I have seen evidence that it was never fully ratified by the 38 states, et cetera, et cetera. But I find that interesting that they had to get around it in order to create this system then, in order to one day, again, to create this power, basically the power away from the people.
Because it's a hidden tax that most people don't notice, inflation. So when you have no anchor to your currency, it's just pieces of paper, or it's ones and zeros in a computer database, then you can create those at will, and you can direct who they go to, and you can give an enormous power and influence to a group of people. So we look at Wall Street bailouts. Well, where is this being bailed out from? Where does this ability to spend so much come from? And if we had the level of government we have today with gold and silver in place, the level of taxation would lead to a revolt. Mm-hmm. But most people don't notice 1 or 2% a year stolen from them over the course of 50 years. Until we get to a point where it's a lot more than that, which is what we've been witnessing recently with greater inflation. And then people start to wake up about it. And people need to wake up and understand what's happening. The dollar has lost more than 99% of its purchasing power since Nixon closed the gold window back in 1971. Prior to that time, so the aftermath of World War II, a system was set in place called Bretton Woods, to where the dollar was convertible into gold by foreign nations. And then other nations pegged their currency to the dollar. So the world was in a form of a gold standard, which worked generally to a great degree. Mm-hmm. And we saw, with the Great Society programs and the Vietnam War, the things of the 60s that required massive spending, the United States could not afford that. They couldn't pay for those anymore in the terms of gold. Mm-hmm. So they simply ended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. And that caused the inflation we saw in the 1970s. But we've had inflation ever since taking place, and to the point where, again, the dollar has lost more than 99% of its purchasing power since that event in 1971. So an ounce of gold back in 1971 was $35. Today it's $3,900. So that tells you exactly how this has happened. It's amazing, and yet most people don't recognize it. They don't notice it. We see withholding from paychecks. That's another way that people don't realize how they're being taxed. They see what they receive in their paycheck. They don't see what was taken out before they received it, and realize that was yours to begin with. It's just been confiscated. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many different ways that people are being stolen from, and that's why we see this collapse in the middle class that we've seen.
I think that's a super good analogy, but a reality. So let's say you're 1971. Let's say you have $70, and you go, what, let's do an experiment here. I'm going to take 35 of my 70, and I'm going to put it in a box. And there it is, $35. But I'm going to take my other 35, I'm going to go down to the market or to the coin shop or whatever, the metal shop, and I'm going to buy 1 ounce of gold. And then in this box, I'm going to have the $35 in paper, and in this box, I'm going to have 1 ounce of gold. And fast forward, here we are 54 years later, and you go, what's my $35 going to get me? And then what's the 1 ounce of gold going to get me? I mean, that's, one is you think it's 3,900 now, or getting close to it. So you divide that out, that's like, it's lost 99.99% of its value.
So it's not the gold gaining value, it's the dollar losing value. So that ounce of gold will pretty much get you what an ounce of gold would have gotten back in 1971.
Yes.
But the $35
Right.
gets you a tiny, tiny fraction of what it did in 1971.
Yeah, even if you said back then, let's say, maybe times 100 or something, where you would have you take 100 of the value of back then, where you take 100, what would $3,500 get you back in 1970? Would that get you a house? Maybe you could get something for, a lot of times you could get a house. Where today, if you take 100 times, let's say the 3,500 or 3,900 of gold, you think, is that 390,000? That could get you a house.
Right.
So the gold could get you a house. 1 ounce could get you almost a house today. It could get you an ounce back then could get you a house or something close. But that $35,
right,
you're not getting a house for that.
No doubt. And another way of looking at this is, so prior to 1965 in the United States, quarters and dimes were 90% silver. And so again, there was a standard there that didn't deviate much over time. What you could buy in 1950 versus 1960, it was pretty much same purchasing power. And we often hear people say, I remember when things were this expensive, such as I used to be able to get a hamburger for a quarter and fries for a dime. Now I can't. And I would say, well, no, if you use the same quarters and dimes from 1960,
you cash them in for their value?
Because, right, the pre-1965 quarter today is over $7 if you get online and try to buy one. And the federal minimum wage in 1963 was $1.25, 5 of those quarters. Mm-hmm. So that means the federal minimum wage was over $35 in today's dollars back in 1963. No wonder people are struggling to survive, because that equates to $80,000 today, or well over $70,000. And
per year,
I don't know anywhere in America where minimum wage is $35 an hour.
Even in some of the more crazy places like Seattle or something, you're not going to see that. So, I mean, this brings us to kind of a prophetic scenario in that. So they detached us from the gold standard. They create this fiat system with the Federal Reserve and other things. They're able to get into massive amounts of debt, which, of course, now we're in a debt bubble like most countries are, because most people have done the same system. So was, in that sense, in the sense of the powers that be, whatever they might be, maybe it's satanic, whatever the spiritual realm, evil entities, did they do this to get us to where they could produce a crash, chaos, and then bring in the next system, which would be the digital? Is that, give us your thoughts on that, and is that what you see playing out?